Welcome to Betrayal Trauma Recovery. I'm Anne. It's summer, and I remember being so excited, thinking my marriage would improve as we spent quality time together on that road trip or family reunion. If you end up having the same experience I did, where vacations left me feeling more hopeless and scared because I found out on one of those trips that my husband was using explicit material and lying to me about it. We're here for you every day, all summer long. You don't have to schedule an appointment or wait. You can hop on one of our daily group sessions from anywhere. We're an empathetic team of betrayal trauma professionals, and we can help you right away. Our daily group session support is the safest space for women to focus on their healing without fear of being traumatized by a therapist or clergy who might seem to think that you're part of the problem. You're not, and you're not alone. If you're ready to join a community of women who truly understand, check out our group session schedule at btr.org/group. We'd love to see you today. And if this podcast has been helpful to you, subscribing and leaving a 5-star review is the best way to help other women find it. Follow on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Together we can reach every woman who needs to hear this. It's just me today. So many women wonder about addiction marriage counseling. BTR clients, women in the Betrayal Trauma Recovery group sessions, and women in our community often ask our coaches or ask me, I need a good couple therapist. Who should I go to? And that's what I'm going to talk about today. When it comes to women seeking couple therapy or sex addiction marriage counseling, these are the two scenarios I see the most often. Number one, when a woman is unaware that her husband is secretly using pornography or having affairs or hooking up with women from online dating apps, usually the woman isn't aware that her husband is doing this. She just knows something's wrong in her marriage. And in that case, people in general recommend couple therapy all the time. And because this is the most common recommendation, of course she's going to think that couple therapy will help. And number two, the wife convinces the husband to go to therapy, his own therapy. But then when she doesn't see a difference or she feels like he's getting worse, she'll think, well, maybe if I'm involved, then I'll see the improvements I'm looking for. I have a master's degree in education, and abuse educators like me don't advise sex addiction marriage counseling in any way, shape, or form. Some women are confused because the rare abuse program out there will ask for your, meaning the victim's, involvement so the therapist can get the truth about what's going on. Why does a so-called good abuse program want the wife's involvement? It's because they know that the abuser will continue to lie and manipulate the therapist. They also know that if she's not involved, he's not going to go, which is just like the biggest red flag right there. I've interviewed over 300 betrayal trauma victims on my podcast and in our community, and due to their reports about the harm done to them in both of these scenarios, I don't advise any of the following: couple therapy, sex addiction marriage counseling, suggesting your husband get therapy, or being involved in his treatment in any way. Even if you have your own therapist and then he has his own therapist and they talk to each other, I do not recommend that either. I'll talk about what I do recommend near the end of the podcast. It'll become really obvious why I don't recommend sex addiction marriage counseling ever, as I talk about the 5 things that need to be true in order for couple therapy to be effective. All right. Number 1, everyone involved needs to know the truth about the source of the conflict and agree on the source of the conflict. So in a regular couple therapy situation, it might be that he likes golf and she hates golf. And that's it. That is the source of the conflict, that he golfs a lot and she doesn't want him to golf a lot. And he's like, yeah, that is the source of the conflict. I mean, the truth is out there. Number 2, both partners willingly, honestly, and humbly identify their contribution to the conflict without needing to be convinced of it by someone else. So no one is trying to impose their interpretation on one of the other people. And they're both willingly, honestly, and humbly identifying their contribution. Number 3, both partners have healthy expectations for the relationship. So in regular couple therapy, it might be that spending 2 nights together a week is healthy, but expecting your partner to be with you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week is not very healthy. Number 4, both partners have consistently demonstrated that they actually do. So this is something that you've seen with your eyeballs, not something that they talk about. They actively actually do childcare, household chores, and relationship management independently without prompting or oversight from the other. So this would mean that he takes care of the kids without being asked, without being managed. He can do household chores without being managed. He takes the initiative to be actively involved in the marriage, in his child's life, and the upkeep of the household. Grocery shopping, cleaning, all that stuff. And number 5, the reason that the couple is going to couple therapy is to improve their communication skills, to improve their conflict resolution skills or their intimacy skills. It's not to address his abuse or his lying or his affairs. So if a man is a porn user and he's having affairs, sexting coworkers, if he's been lying to you for years, if he's been blaming you to manipulate you and to exploit you, none of those 5 things I just said can be true. Number 1, because he's purposefully lying and manipulating you and everyone else to avoid the true source of the conflict, his porn use or his lies or his double life. Number 2, he's never willingly, honestly, or humbly identified that he is the source of the conflict, that his choices are the source of the conflict. In fact, he's been hiding it from you on purpose, gaslighting you so that you don't discover it. Number 3, due to his porn use, he doesn't have healthy expectations. If he expects you to look like the women in porn look, that's not healthy. If he views you as an object, he'll expect you to just do what he wants, like don't ask questions. That's not a healthy expectation. If he's an exploiter, he's going to see the relationship as a series of transactions, like he goes to work, you give him sex, or he brings home a paycheck and you manage the children and the household chores and the relationship and everything else. That's a transactionship. That's not a relationship. Number 4, if he has an exploitative character, the likelihood of him, without you managing it for him, managing childcare, household tasks, any of that stuff, grocery shopping, the likelihood of him repairing the relationship or planning dates or starting hard conversations is almost like 0. He might do these things to groom you while he's trying to achieve a goal, but once that goal is achieved, he'll stop. So he doesn't consistently do any of these things. And number 5, as you're thinking about couple therapy in this scenario, if you're thinking about sex addiction marriage counseling, you don't want to go to therapy to improve communication skills because your communication is fine. Your conflict resolution skills, your intimacy skills are just fine. So if you're not thinking, hey, I need to improve my intimacy skills or I need to improve my conflict resolution, if you just want to stop him from abusing you or you want to just figure out what's going on, then number 5 is not true and couple therapy or sex addiction marriage counseling is not going to work for you. Unfortunately, even if none of the 5 requirements for couple therapy are true, she may not know that he's lying, and couple therapists don't do emotional or psychological abuse screenings before they start couple therapy, and they don't do abuse screenings for sex addiction marriage counseling either. So most of the time, a couple therapist does not know what is going on, and neither does she. And this situation is going to make it worse. See, a regular couple therapist only has one job. It's to help the couple improve communication so they can resolve their conflicts. A man with an exploitative character is never interested in resolving conflicts. Although he may talk like he is, that's actually a way that he's going to continue to manipulate a victim. If he's only interested in exploiting you, he's going to see this whole situation as this perfect setup to continue to lie and manipulate you through the therapist. So I just talked about the 5 things that need to be true for couple therapy, and they apply equally to sex addiction marriage counseling, which is why no one ever should go to sex addiction marriage counseling, because those 5 things are never true if there's sex addiction. When it comes to classic couple therapy, there are 5 things that guarantee that a couple therapist will enable his abuse and things will get worse for you. It will actually put your marriage at a greater risk for divorce because his abuse is going to escalate during couple therapy or sex addiction marriage counseling. And if he starts to escalate due to couple therapy or sex addiction marriage counseling, divorce might be your only option for safety. So you need to take this very seriously if you want to avoid divorce. I take this extremely seriously because on a very personal level, divorce did not solve my ex-husband's abuse problem. He continued to abuse me and my children emotionally and psychologically and financially for 8 years after our divorce. So I get it that women don't want to consider divorce, and I'll tell you my personal story of what happened with couple therapy in a minute. If you want to avoid divorce, you want to avoid an escalation of his abuse for obvious reasons. That's the number one reason. You never want to go to couple therapy or even desire couple therapy or sex addiction marriage counseling. When it comes to just regular couple therapists who are trained in abuse will refuse to treat couples who meet the following criteria. However, what I've noticed is they're not trained in abuse, so they don't know to refuse couples who meet this criteria, or they think there's some kind of exception. Women have told me so many stories of a couple therapist or sex addiction marriage counselor who thought he or she was like this gift to humanity, and this pride caused them to bend the rules because they thought they'd been more successful than they actually were. So in the 300 interviews I did with betrayal trauma victims, they report they went to couple therapy or sex addiction marriage counseling, and then they actually thought that it worked for a minute. These women were pretty happy in the moment, and then they stopped going to therapy. And then they find out 6 months, a year, 2 years later that her husband was lying and manipulating the entire time. And it's so traumatic to find that out. And so when she discovers that the couple therapy or the sex addiction marriage counseling made it worse, like he was able to groom her and manipulate her even worse than before, she usually doesn't go back to that same therapist because even the thought of that therapist is so traumatic for her. It's painful to her to even think that she just spent all of that money and time and it didn't do anything. So she usually doesn't go back and say, hey, this didn't work. So these therapists, all they know is that she left happy. They don't know the end of the story. Alternatively, women tell me all the time that they came to Betrayal Trauma Recovery, started listening to the podcast, and they were like, this is kind of extreme. I don't think this is my situation. So then they went to couple therapy, had a horrific experience, and they come back to Betrayal Trauma Recovery like 5 years later and let me know, oh my word, this is what happened. And they tell me their stories. So women come back to Betrayal Trauma Recovery all the time to tell me what happened. Whereas I don't think your typical therapist has that scenario. So they just think that they were successful. I find the attitude from couple therapists or sex addiction marriage counselors that they can fix an abuser to be very offensive, as they don't understand abuse in that case, or they think the criteria I'm about to tell you doesn't apply to them, which is a huge red flag. And if they don't have a screening process for this type of abuse, it's absolutely unethical. So, a couple therapist should refuse to treat any couple who meets any of these 5 criteria. Number 1, if there is abuse of any type, emotional, psychological, sexual, physical, financial, any abuse whatsoever. Lying is abuse, manipulation is abuse, gaslighting is abuse. So if your husband lied to you about his porn use, then he's been abusing you, and that disqualifies you as a couple from sex addiction marriage counseling or couple therapy. But if you don't know that he's been lying and you go to couple therapy, do you see the problem here? If he's been lying to you about his pornography use or about his infidelity, he's not going to suddenly tell the truth to a couple therapist. Similarly, if admits to the porn use or you find it, and so you're like, hey, let's go to sex addiction marriage counseling, you're in the same boat. Like either way, there's been abuse, but the sex addiction marriage counselor is not going to see it as an abuse issue. They're going to treat it as an addiction issue. Number 2, any couple where one or both of the partners has a mental illness or an addiction problem, couple therapy is never indicated. So even if you don't want to label his addiction as abuse, This still disqualifies you as a couple from sex addiction marriage counseling. Like, sex addiction marriage counseling should not even exist. It should not be a thing. Anyone doing it is unethical because you've got abuse and you've got addiction and you may have a mental illness issue as well. But let's just look at the victim for just a second. Even if she's been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder or depression or even sometimes bipolar, a lot of times she's diagnosed with these things because she's an abuse victim and they don't factor that in. So rather than saying, you're fine, there's nothing wrong with you, you're just an abuse victim, let's get you to safety, she gets a diagnosis. But every therapist should know that if mental illness is part of the mix, couple therapy is contraindicated. So if there's any mental illness in the mix that's diagnosed or known, or if he's a known sex addict, that couple therapist should immediately stop couple therapy. And if you ever have a therapist who says that, hey, he's a sex addict and so you need sex addiction marriage counseling, biggest red flag in the universe. Let's go back to this mental illness issue for just a minute. Some experts say that 2/3 of pornography addicts have a mental illness. Now, I don't really care about this part because all I care about is how it affects her, and to her, it's abuse. But the stats are 44% of sex addicts have a personality disorder or traits of a personality disorder. And so some therapists will be like, oh, there's a mental illness, let's treat that. I'll tell you why I'm not a big fan of that in just a minute. I also might say to you, you are experiencing PTSD symptoms, which is true. However, do they say you're experiencing PTSD symptoms, but you're fine and you're totally normal and you're acting exactly as you should be acting as an abuse victim? Because that's what they should be telling you. Instead, if they say you have some kind of mental illness because of your PTSD, then you also would be disqualified from couple therapy, which would for sure disqualify you from sex addiction marriage counseling. Number 3, if there is a lack of empathy, then couple therapy is contraindicated. This is where one or both parties are unwilling or unable to understand the other person's perspective. If empathy is lacking, a lot of therapists who have this like, I can fix him complex will embark on trying to teach him to have empathy. They'll give him scripts and do empathy training, like a fake it till you make it sort of approach. And that is so dangerous because then abusers learn to mimic empathy, but they don't actually feel it. So they understand the mechanics and then they'll just use it as a weapon to groom you. And wives come back and report over and over and over that this type of therapy made their husband like a super abuser, that he began to talk in very empathetic ways and he sounded better, but it just felt so cruel because his behavior hadn't changed and he was doing it in ways that were just so much more like insidious and almost evil. Like we've had women come back and say he turned into the scariest person ever because everyone else was like, look how healthy and wonderful he is and he's so empathetic and loving. And he used those scripts from couple therapy or sex addiction marriage counseling to manipulate more. And that is one of the most distressing things that women report. Number 4, if one person is engaged in a relationship outside of the marriage, so like pornography, which is a sexual relationship with hundreds of women outside the marriage, emotional affairs, then couple therapy is always contraindicated. And then number 5, if one person doesn't have a desire to reconcile or solve problems. So a man with an exploitative character, he never has the goal of solving problems. His only goal is to get what he wants from her, not to build something together. And so if he's got that type of character, whether you know it or not, couple therapy is going to escalate the situation. As reported by the women that I interviewed, some therapists will say that if an addict or abuser has had a certain period of sobriety or hasn't been abusive or has been in treatment for his addiction or his abuse for a year or a certain amount of time, then it's okay to start couple therapy or sex addiction marriage counseling. And they report that it did not go well even after a period of sobriety or a period of treatment. In fact, my own experience illustrates this really well. My husband had been going to his own individual sex addiction therapist for years. We'd never tried sex addiction marriage counseling or couple therapy before because I'd always refused. And things did seem like they had gotten a little bit better. They hadn't. It was more like I was the frog in the pot, I didn't know that he had learned to lie better. But because I thought things had improved since he'd been doing therapy and going to 12-step, he admitted he was an addict. And then he said the reason why things weren't going perfectly yet was because we needed to go to couple therapy. There were some things that, quote unquote, we needed to work out. He'd been wanting me to do couple therapy the entire time. Sorry, side note, just yesterday I had one victim tell me if I knew that he wanted to do it, I knew it was a bad idea. And that was my best test for whether or not the course of action was safe, which kind of makes me smile now because my husband at the time, he really wanted to do couple therapy. He was so excited. I remember when I agreed to it, he literally leapt off the couch and was like, awesome, everything's going to get better now. So we did 19 sex addiction marriage counseling sessions, and things only escalated. I think it's because he thought now's the time I can unleash all of my resentments toward her, all of my feelings based on all of my erroneous thought processes, because he hadn't changed his abusive thinking at all. And he wanted the couple therapist to cram it into me because he was like, I can't convince her that she's got these problems, but now I can get the therapist to do it. And he became more and more abusive to the point where he was actually arrested. And the court gave him a no contact order. Now, couples therapists, ethically to maintain their licensure, must operate under the assumption of safety and equality. And in a situation with sexual betrayal and sexual addiction, there is no equality. Lies create an abusive power dynamic, because one person has more power than the other person because they have more information. So any couple therapist who does not see lying as an abuse issue creates a situation that is unequal and unsafe. And so they're not maintaining those ethical standards of operating with safety and equality. Okay, let's move on to the second scenario that I introduced at the very beginning, when wives avoid sex addiction marriage counseling or couple therapy, but think that his individual therapy isn't going that well. And maybe if she talks to his therapist, then the outcome will improve. When I discovered the Living Free strategies, one of the things that was rattling around in my mind was that one really well-known sex addiction marriage counselor, I'd heard accounts over and over and over again of his abuse to women. He would require her to sign a contract that she wouldn't leave the marriage for a year, that she couldn't use anything that she learned in sex addiction marriage counseling. In a divorce, he made her sign a sex contract. Stuff was really bad. I've heard a lot about this guy. He would tell the addicts or the abusers, if she's angry, don't worry, we can work with that. That's not a problem. The only thing that we can't use is your wife's apathy. Knowing that he thought he could use the woman's emotions to benefit this addict or abuser, and the only thing that he felt he could not use to the abuser's advantage was apathy. That rattled around in my mind for a long time. And that concept is explained really well in the Betrayal Trauma Recovery Living Free workshop. The Living Free workshop outlines why it's not safe to have your therapist talk to your husband's therapist, or to participate in your husband's therapy as an observer, or meeting with a therapist together with your husband, even if the therapist says it's not couple therapy or it's not sex addiction marriage counseling, which seems like word salad to me. So after explaining to you all the reasons why couple therapy is sometimes counterindicated and sex addiction marriage counseling is always contraindicated, you're probably thinking, we don't fit the criteria and he is continuing to harm me. So what do I do? I outline exactly what to do in the BTR Living Free workshop. Because it's different than anything you've heard before, I wanted to visually show this to you. The Living Free workshop is 55 video lessons. The total runtime of all 55 lessons is only 2 hours and 20 minutes. On average, they're only 3 minutes each. I broke it up into tiny bite-sized pieces. The shortest videos is 28 seconds. The longest one is 6 minutes. There's a question in between each lesson that you can either answer if you want to process it on a really deep level, or you can just like put an X in the box and push next. And then you also process the information with the free workbook that comes with it. It's a PDF. It's a really beautiful 2-page spread. And so if you want it in color, if you get it printed at like Kinko's or something, it's more expensive. The cheapest way to print it is to order it on Amazon. It'll come really quick, or you can print it at your house. Either way, just make sure if you print it to print it double-sided. The Living Free Workshop will help determine your husband's character and help you know what to do. If you take the Living Free Workshop and you're like, oh, wait, he's actually not abusive, then couple therapy might be an option for you, and that would be great. But sex addiction marriage counseling should never be on the table because it never meets the criteria for couple therapy. Ever. I don't even know why it exists. If you've enrolled in the Living Free Workshop, I'd love to know what you thought about it. So go to our website, btr.org, type in the search bar, "Is sex addiction marriage counseling right for us?" That's the title of this episode. Go to this episode and let me know what you thought. Did the Living Free Workshop clear this up for you and explain what to do? And are you like on the right track now? I would love to know if anyone enrolled in the Living Free Workshop and it helped them determine that their husband was not abusive. As always, I welcome your feedback. If this podcast is helpful to you, follow or subscribe on your favorite podcasting app to help other women find it. You can also subscribe to this podcast on YouTube. While you're there, comment, give it a 5-star rating. That'll help bump us up in the algorithm. Thank you to those of you who have subscribed on YouTube or other places and commented and given us 5-star reviews, because that's the #1 way to get the word out to other women about this. If you've already purchased a copy of my book, Trauma Mama Husband Drama, from Amazon, please circle back and give it a 5-star rating. A lot of women are searching for books to figure out what to do about their husband, and rating Trauma Mama on Amazon will help them find this podcast, which is free to everyone. And of course, your generous donations keep this podcast going. Go to btr.org, scroll to the bottom, and click on Support the Podcast. And until next week, stay safe out there.